If you want to be a pro at making loops, you need to make this necklace. Hello, welcome, my name's Carol. Today I'm going to be making a nice simple necklace and I am going to be showing you how to make loops. Now I know I've done this before and I will leave you some links in the description box to some other videos about making loops. But I had a one-on-one session with someone this morning and she was really struggling with loops, so I thought I'd go through it again for you. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of making this necklace and I'll talk about everything you need as well. So let's get making. First, I've got some of these Indian glass grape coloured beads and they're kind of a diamond shape. They're quite an odd shaped bead actually. They're a diamond shape and they're quite round and fat. And they measure 22 by 10, so quite a large bead, and those are going to be my focals. As well as that, I've got some glass diamonds. These ones are also Indian lampwork beads and these ones measure 13 by 5. The colour is purple. I've got some metal rice beads here. These ones are 17 millimeters by 7. As well as that, I've got some 4 millimeter faceted glass beads, and this one is a multicolored bead and it has an AB finish. I've got some 3 millimeter silver balls. I've got some hematite magnetic beads. These ones are 6 millimeters and these ones stick to each other because they are magnetic. And some people wear these for health reasons. As well as that, I've got two 6 millimeter glass beads here that are electroplated, so they actually look like they are silver beads. I've got some 4 millimeter beaded rondelles. I've got a 12 millimeter lobster clasp. I've got some 6 millimeter jump rings and a 4 millimeter jump ring. As well as that, I'm going to be using one silver head pin and some 20 gauge wire to make my loops. In terms of tools, I could use my one-step looper for making this necklace, but I'm not going to do that because today is all about showing you how to make loops. So instead, I'm going to be using my flush cutters. I'm going to be using my round nose pliers, and I'm also going to be using 2 pairs of chain nose pliers. Now, if you're new to jewelry making, chain nose pliers have a flat part on the inside. They're not ridged like the ones you get from the hardware store, and that's important because you do not want to mark your wire. The wire that I'm using is a 20 gauge half hard wire, and it is important to find the right gauge and the right temper, and the temper is how hard the wire is. So for loops and jewelry making, I generally use a half hard wire. Some people who do wire wrapping use a dead soft wire, and some people use a hard wire. But for me personally, I find that a 20 gauge half hard wire works best for me for making loops. All right, we're going to start off with a piece of wire. So I'm just going to straighten it out a bit with my fingers, and you can see it's malleable enough that I can do that. And I'm going to take my flush cutters. Now when you use your flush cutters, you have a flush side and you have a divoted side. So you're always wanting your flush side to be closest to the wire that you're keeping. So in this case, I'm going to be using this part. So I'm using the flush side to cut there. The reason for that is that you want a nice flat cut. If you can see there, my cut is nice and flat. If I show you the other end, you'll see it has a little point on it. And we don't want that because when you do a loop, you want the wire coming around the loop and meeting up with the tail of the loop to be flat. Otherwise it won't sit right. So I'm going to take my wire now and I'm going to make a loop in the wire. And I'm going to start off by putting my pliers about 1 centimetre from the end of the wire, the flat end or the flush cut end. I'm going to make a bend. Now I can just eyeball this, but if you want to measure it, that's fine. I'm going to hold the wire pointing closest to me. So the short end is going to stab me in the chest. And I'm going to take my round nose pliers and put the tip of that wire in my pliers. Now before you make your loop, you need to make sure that the wire here is not sticking up. You should not be able to feel it. If you can feel it, it means that when you come around, the tail will be too long. So we're going to put it in the pliers there, making sure it's not sticking up. Then I'm going to take my thumb here and I'm going to put it into the corner there. And I'm going to press down towards my nail and twist. Then I'm going to remove my pliers, and you can see there I've got half my loop made. Then I'm going to pop my pliers back in and make sure they go as far as they can. I'm going to squeeze and twist again. Now sometimes I have to do this several times to get my loop all the way around, and that's okay. Now there's my loop. Now there is something just a little bit wrong with it. I went a little awry, and this bit here, the tail, here, the beginning of the loop, is just sticking up just a little bit. So to fix that, all I need to do is come in with my chain nose pliers and give it a squish. And now I have a perfect loop. So if you want yours to all look like that, you need to practice lots. And that's why this particular necklace is good, because it's got lots of loops. So practice, practice, practice. I cannot say that enough. That is the only thing that makes it better. That's our first loop. Next, we're going to thread on some beads. And we're going to start off with the component with our big focal. And I'm going to start off by putting on one of my 4mm rondelles, then one of my little daisy spacers or beaded rondelles. Then I'm going to put on my large bead, and then I'm just going to reverse that. So another daisy spacer and another 4mm. Now sometimes people tell me that they can do the first loop, but they really struggle to get the second loop in a component like this. So let's walk through that. Now what you're going to do first is you're going to bend the wire at the top. Now personally I like to put my thumbnail on top of the bead, but if you don't have a thumbnail or your thumbnails are weak, what you can do is just pull the wire. What you're looking for is to get a nice firm bend, like a nice crisp bend. And I get a crisper bend when I use my thumbnail. If you're not getting a crisp bend, you can actually do it with your pliers. Just kind of push back a bit. There we go. So you're wanting your wire there to be at a right angle to the one coming up through the beads. Then what we're going to do is take our flush cutters. With the flush side, we're going to cut that wire at about 1 centimetre again. So the same length you did for the other one. Now, if you want to make bigger loops, make your cut further away from the bend. If you want to make smaller loops, make your cut closer to the bend. And I'm going to hold both ends of my wire and cut. So that's what I have now. And now I'm going to take my round nose pliers and do exactly the same thing as I did before. So taking my wire in the jaws, making sure it's not sticking up, and then I'm going to twist, take my pliers out, put them back in, and twist some more. And there's my loop, and it doesn't look that flash. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fix it. The first thing is it's bending back a little bit, so I'm going to pull it back up, pull it up so it's straight. And if you can see that, it's not quite closed. So to do that, to fix it, what I'm going to do is put my pliers back in, and I'm going to just pull back a little bit. So I'm actually opening the loop, and then I'm going to put my pliers back in and close it again. So that's one way to fix that. I'll show you another one. Hopefully I can make another bad loop so I can show you. I'm sure I can. They're not all perfect, and even when you get really good at this, sometimes your loops will just be awry, and that's okay. You just have bad days, and that is absolutely fine. Now the other thing I'm going to do before I finish with this component is I'm going to take it in my pliers, both of the loops, and I'm going to twist so that both of my loops are now facing the same way. So my pliers are facing the same way, so that means my loops are facing the same way too. So there's my component. Now I need 2 of those, so I'm going to go ahead and make another one. So there are my 2 components and their loops. Now I'm going to make my focal for this necklace. I'm going to use my head pin to do that. And I'm also going to use one of my 4mm faceted glass beads. So I'm threading that on, and one of my beaded rondelles, the last one of my grape beads, and then I'm reversing. So it's basically the same component, except I'm doing it on a head pin instead of having a loop on either end. There we go. Now I'm going to make a loop at the top. So to do that, I'm bending my wire over and I'm cutting it at 1 centimetre with, remember, a flush cut. Just holding the end so it doesn't fly away. Now taking my round nose pliers and I am putting my wire in the jaws of my round nose pliers, making sure it's not sticking up, putting my thumbnail into that corner there, whoops, and I'm going to twist. Now you notice I'm kind of pulling back and forward, and the reason I'm doing that is because my little end here was not going to meet my tail. I call this bit the tail and the other bit the end. So to fix that, what I'm doing is just pulling back a bit and continuing to turn it until I get my loop closed. I'm going to give it a bit of a squeeze, and it's a little bit crooked, so I'm just going to pull that bit back a little bit. So there is my component, that's my center dangle. So pop that over there. Next, we're going to use our diamond shaped beads, and we are going to make another component. So just taking some more wire, making sure I've got a flush cut, which I have, and I'm going to make a bend at about 1 centimetre in. You'll get so tired of hearing me say this. I'm going to grab the end of the wire in my pliers, make sure it's not sticking up, and twist some more. Not a bad loop. Just going to give it a bit of a squeeze to make it flat. And this time we are going with one of our hematite beads, a daisy spacer, our rectangle diamond, it's a diamond, another daisy spacer, and another hematite bead. Now these ones want to stick to each other. That's just the way magnetic hematite beads work. Okay, so there is my component. Now I'm going to bend at the top of the wire, take my cutters and cut with a flush cut at the centimetre mark, and then I am going to take my round nose pliers and make my loop. So making sure it's not sticking up, tucking my thumbnail in there and twisting. Doesn't have to be on your thumbnail. If you just stick your finger, I mean, I know I've got long nails, but if you just stick your finger in there, it will work. And there is my component. Now the other thing I need to do before I finish this is to make sure my loops are going the same way. And the reason I'm doing this is so that it sits nicely when it's all put together. You can see there my loops are going in the opposite direction, so I'm just going to twist to make them go in the same way. Okay, so that's that one, and I need 2 of those, so I'll go ahead and make one. There are my 2 components with the diamonds and the magnetic beads. Next, we're going to make a component with the rice beads. So we'll take those and some more wire. If you need to make a flush cut on the end, you just need to trim off the merest little bit. Just make sure you cover it, because these little bits are terrible if they get in your feet. So just make sure you cover it and then put it in the bin. Into my bin. So you know what I'm going to say, take your pliers, make a bend at 1 centimetre in, take your round nose pliers and make your loop. So what happens if your loop looks like this? What that means is that your wire was too long from the bend to the end. So it's easy to fix. You can just pull it back a bit, so put your pliers back in there again. You can trim off just the tiniest little bit. So taking your flush cutters with the flush side, remember the flush side always goes to the bit you want to keep, cover it up and snip and put it in the bin. So that's what I have now. It doesn't look much like a loop, but what I can do is stick my pliers in here, my round nose pliers, and twist again until I get my loop closed. That's what I have now. Still not quite right, because the wire, this part of the wire is not coming up in the center. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is take my loop in my chain nose pliers, and I'm positioning it right at the tip there where the two wires meet. I'm doing that, and then I'm going to just give it a little bend backwards. And there we have the perfect loop. So you thought that loop wasn't savable, but it was. Now we're going to make this component. We're going to take one of our little balls, our metal 3mm balls, and pop that on. I'm going to take a beaded rondelle and one of my rice beads, pop that on, another beaded rondelle, and one more of my little silver beads. There's that component, and I'm going to make a loop in the top. So to do that, I'm going to bend the wire. Then I am going to take my flush cutters with the flush side and cut about 1 centimetre from the bend. And I am going to take the wire in my pliers, make sure it's not sticking up, and give it a twist. Take my pliers out, give it another twist. And then the last thing to do is make sure my two loops are facing the same way, which they are. There's that component, and I need 2 of those as well, so I will go ahead and make another one. So we have 2 more components to make. This one is a single bead component, and sometimes people struggle with making the loops on either side of a single bead, especially if it's a small one. So let's go ahead and make that. So we're going to start off with our wire with a flush cut. We are going to make a bend about 1 centimetre in. Now that to me looks like it's slightly longer than 1 centimetre, so I'm just going to trim off that little bit of the end. Putting it in my round nose pliers and making sure that the wire doesn't stick up. Other people do it the other way, but for me personally, I find that having the bend in the wire sticking up towards me works better, and I move my hand away. Other people do it the other way, so do what's best for you. So if you feel that this doesn't work for you, then try switching it around so that you have the bend facing away from you like that, and then you twist your hand towards you. Personally, my wrist doesn't work that way. So taking that in the jaws of the pliers, making sure it's not sticking up, and I'm holding this tail there like that. So I've got my thumbnail sticking into the bend there, and I'm just holding the rest of the wire in my hand, and we're going to make a loop. That was a pretty good one. And this time I'm going to make it with my glass bead here. So there's my bead on there. And to make a loop on the other end, it's basically the same process, but people do struggle with this one because it's small and there's not much to hang on to. So just bend your wire over and cut it off. And taking it in your round nose pliers, and I find that if I hold the bead between my thumb and my forefinger there, that works best. And just make sure it's not sticking up and give it a twist. Take your pliers out and twist again. That is what I have now, and you can see that my loops are going in opposite directions, so I want to make sure that they're both going the same way. So I take my 2 pairs of chain nose pliers and I give it a bit of a twist. And I need 2 of those, so I'll go ahead and make another one. So there are my 2 pieces, or my 2 components. Now before I go any further, I wanted to say if you're interested in making the jewellery that I'm wearing today, I will leave you links in the description box for the tutorial for the necklace. And the earrings are just a combination of the beads we're using today, and I'm going to do a short on those, so I'll leave you the link for that as well. The last component we are going to make is using more of our hematite beads. So I'm going to take my wire, and I don't have a flush cut on this piece, so I need to trim off the end. Now I'm taking my round nose pliers and making sure the wire isn't sticking up. I am going to make my loop. Just twist, readjust, and twist some more. Okay, so my loop now is not closed. So Firstly, I'm going to give it a squeeze this way because it's a bit bent. There we go. So that's a pretty ugly looking loop. So let's see if we can fix it. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull it back. So I'm going to put my thumbnail in there and pull it back. Now, if you don't have a thumbnail, you can hold it with your pliers, with one pair of pliers, and put your round nose pliers in, and that will do the same thing. So to give you that nice sharp bend that you need. So that's what I have now. And I'm going to put my pliers back in there. Now this time I don't want to go all the way up because that loop won't close if I go all the way up. So I'm actually going to use the tip of my pliers. I'm just going to make sure that they're right on the end of the wire, and I'm going to twist. So there's my loop now. Still not perfect. So we're going to take our chain nose pliers, hold it there, and just bend that wire back. So hopefully you're getting some good tips on how to fix your loops. I'm trying really hard to do them wrong. Okay, so now we are going to make our components with our magnetic beads. So I'm taking one of my 4mm faceted beads, one of my hematite beads. I'm going to put on a beaded rondelle, and then another hematite bead, and another of my faceted beads. So there we go, and I'm going to make my loop. So bend the wire. Can you see what happened there? So my wire is actually bent, it's curved here. So to fix that, you can just straighten it up with your thumb and your finger. There we go. That's better. Okay, a cut, flush cut, about 1 centimetre from the end. Taking my round nose pliers. Let me show you what happens when it's not flush. Hopefully you can see that little tail poking out. I might have to redo this one because sometimes these loops aren't savable. But when you twist it and then you take your wire, your pliers out and you retwist it, you can see what's happening here. So there's no way I can actually get that into the right position because it's too long, it's sticking out over my beads. So I'm going to pull it right back and we'll try and fix it. Sometimes you can't, but you can see there that the loop is, this is where it's been round the pliers, and then it's got this straight bit, and that's the problem child. So I want to take my pliers, and I'm going to use the tip of my pliers, and I'm going to put them on that little straight bit right at the end so the tail's not sticking out. And then I'm going to twist, and then I can twist some more until I get it in the right space. And if you need to pull it back a bit, you can. It is now a better loop, at least it's closed. The other thing to think about if you're having problems with that, let me just show you with this piece of wire. So there's my bend, and my wire is too long. So what I'm going to do is take my wire and my chain nose and my round nose pliers, and it's still sticking up a little bit. So if I twist and then I twist again, sometimes this happens. Let's turn it over. You can see there that the end of the wire is actually folded over. It's bent over, right over the loop. So to fix this one, this is quite an interesting one. So what you do is you take your loop in your pliers and you open it like that. Now what you want to do is take your flush cutters, and you need to gauge it, but you want to cut off that piece that is too long. Making sure you've got the flush side on the bit you want to keep, and just giving it a wee snip, making sure it's a nice flat cut. So that is what I have now. And I'm going to close this loop and see how close to being right it is. Not bad. Okay, next I'm going to make another one of these components. Now this one, you know, usually when I make components like this, I often go small, medium, large. This time I didn't want to put a big bead in the center, so I used a beaded rondelle instead, and I think it worked really well. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think this works, or should I have used a larger bead in the center of this component? So snipping off my wire with the flush side of my cutters and coming in here with my round nose pliers, making sure that the wire's not sticking up, and twist. Readjust and twist again, and readjust again if you need to. I need to also make sure that these loops are going the same way, so we'll do that and do that. There's my 2, and I actually need 4 of those, so I'll go ahead and make 2 more. There are my 4 components. The last thing I need to do is basically join it all together. Now I had to make some decisions about how I would join it. It's always the way, you need to make decisions when you are jewellery making. So what I decided was I would join it with jump rings. I could have opened these components, the loops, and joined them together, but it sits better if you use a jump ring. So we're going to start off with our main focal, and I'm going to take a jump ring and I'm going to open it. This one's already open. Let's choose another one so I can show you. If you haven't used jump rings before, I've got a video on how to use them, so I'll leave that linked in the description box below. So I'm taking it in my pliers, and you can see here the split is at the top. So I hold it on the side of my jump ring like this. I don't want to hold it like this because it will bend the jump ring. So I'm taking it in my pliers, one on either side, and giving my hand a twist down, and that will open my jump ring. And I'm going to feed on the focal component, and then I want to put on 2 of these components, the ones with the diamonds. I'm just popping them on there, and I'm going to close it up. So to close it up, I grab it the same as it was before, and I basically reverse that process. So just twisting my hand down. Now my jump ring is not closed. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's got a little gap, about 1 millimeter. So what I want to do here is I want to go up and down, pushing my right hand towards my left hand, or vice versa, going up and down as I do that. And what that will do is make this jump ring closed. And there is my first components joined together. So what you're aiming for here is to have your jump ring kind of the circle facing up. All right, so next we are going to use some more jump rings, and we are going to attach this one on either side. So as I said, this one's already open, so I'm just going to pop that on there and pop this one on, and then I'm going to close that up. And then I'm going to repeat for the other side. If you're interested in seeing more of my tutorials, remember to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and also give me a thumbs up if you like this one. And if you want to see even more of me, there are a couple of things you can do. One, you can go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter, and that way you'll be notified when I upload new tutorials and other stuff that's happening. And also, if you want even more, you could hit the join button down below and join my private membership group here on YouTube. There are 2 levels of membership. One of them you get a live once a month, and the other one you get the live and a Zoom call with me once a month. And lots of other stuff, lots of sharing of pictures and what I'm working on and things like that. So if you want to join the community, go ahead and click that join button. Okay, so there is my necklace so far, and I'm quite happy with it. This is such a Carol necklace. The colours are perfect. It's got that dangle in the middle. It's just perfectly me. Okay, I'm going to take another jump ring and opening it up and feeding on this one. And this time I am going to be feeding on one of my rice components here and closing up my jump ring. If you do decide to make this and you share it on your social media, remember to tag me. Okay, there we go. That one is now done. I'm just looking at this jump ring, it's not quite closed. So I'm going to go back in with my pliers and close it up. So remember to do that, you're just lifting up and down and pushing one pair of pliers towards the other. The next components are these ones here. We're going to stick one on there and one on there. So let's do that. the magnetic beads are sticking to my pliers. Okay, now we've got 2 components left, and we're going to stick one on either end like that. So just opening my jump ring, feeding that one on and the next one, and closing up my jump ring. Now the problem with these magnetic beads is they don't like to, they either want to stick to each other or they don't want to be next to each other. So sometimes they jump off. Just pop them on again. Oh dear, I've forgotten something, haven't I? Did you see what I did? I've got 2 components left. So we're going to go back and add those in. I was thinking I had too many jump rings. Okay, so they actually go in, they go here. So I'm going to open this jump ring and I'm going to take that one off. See, it happens no matter how experienced you are. Strange things happen, don't they? I'm going to open that one. I'm going to take the rice bead off and I'm going to put this one on and closing that up. And I'll go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. So there I have put my beads on. Now I need to use another jump ring to attach this one. Another way that you can see more of me is I have just implemented on my website a consultation. So if you want a private consultation with me, you can book that via my website as well. So go ahead and check that out. And I'll leave a link in the description box for that one as well. That's better, that looks much better. Now the last thing we want to do is add our clasp. And of course a ring for the clasp to go into. So I'm going to use a 6mm jump ring to put my clasp into, or to do up my clasp into. I just prefer a 6mm rather than a 4. I find the 4s are too fiddly. So I'm just going to pop that onto one side here and close my jump ring. When you finish a project, it's actually a really good idea to go back through and check all of your jump rings are closed, because, and all of your loops, because you know you're in the process and you're making your loops and you're doing up your jump rings, and sometimes you just miss one or maybe it's not closed quite enough. So just go back and double check every single jump ring and every single loop to make sure they're closed, because the last thing you want is for your necklace to fall apart while you're wearing it. To add my clasp, I am going to use a 4mm jump ring. You could use a 6 if you prefer. Personally, I just prefer to use a 4. I think it looks neater. So opening my jump ring, threading on the loop of my clasp and the last loop of my necklace here, and closing it up. But if you find 4mm are too fiddly, that's okay. I prefer that, but that's a personal preference thing. There it is on, and it matches the earrings now. I've got a matching set. I don't usually do matchy-matchy, but sometimes it's nice to have matchy-matchy. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope by the time, if you make this, by the time you have made it, you will be a real pro at making those loops, because I've given you all my tips. But remember to check out that other video on how to troubleshoot loops, because I think that one is really useful as well. And also the jump rings. Also check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and think about clicking that join button below and the subscribe and all of that stuff. Thank you so much for watching today. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you again soon.